Greetings aspirants. Welcome to Narayana IAS. In this daily news analysis today, we have picked up few important articles from both Hindu and Indian Express. We'll look into the articles that we have picked up. The first article is the constitutional collapse from Indian Express, page number 10. The second article is an unequal space, again from Indian Express, page number 10. The third one is coming soon, a cafeteria for oil spill hit birds at creek in Tamil Nadu. This is the article from the Hindu on page number 1. And the fourth one is the IMF's message, again from Indian Express, page number 10. And the fifth one is the WHO pre-qualifies a malarial vaccine by Serum Institute, again from the Hindu newspaper, page number 16. We'll look into the first article, that is the constitutional collapse. This article, as we see, has appeared in the Indian Express, wherein it is saying that the parliament without opposition has passed certain bills, and this is seen as an unbridled power of the executive that has been exercised on the floor of the parliament. What are the constitutional concerns that this particular article is raising is what the debate that we are going to look into. Look at this previous year question. To what extent, in your view, the parliament is able to ensure accountability of the executive in India? This has been asked, as you see, in 2021. Again, looking into this debate of how far the parliament is able to exercise her control over the executive, because that is the fundamental principle of the checks and balances system that has been immersed into the constitutional framework. What is the context in which we are discussing this particular topic? We know that there is a lot of criticism over the bills which have been passed by the parliament recently. And second, there are also concerns over the way in which the parliament has functioned in the current session, wherein in the absence of many number of opposition MPs, these bills have been passed and certain important decisions or legislations have been made. It is in this particular context this debate is being reached. What is the conceptual framework we have to know in order to really assess and analyze the concerns over these two particular issues? There are two fundamental principles which govern the functioning of any parliamentary democracy. The first particular principle is the separation of power principles, the separation of powers principle, and the second principle is the checks and balances system. Checks and balances. India being a republic and India being a liberal democracy, these two particular principles have been intruded into the constitution such that the constitutionality of the functioning of the government can be ensured. What does this separation of powers principle state? The separation of powers principle state that the function that the government is going to be performing is threefold, and these three functions are specialized functions, and hence the institution which are going to be formed in the form of government must perform these three specialized functions separately, wherein government executing the law, legislature legislating the law, and the judiciary interpreting the law. The separation of powers principle, as we have seen, has included into the constitutional framework such that the independence of the functionality of these particular governmental functions can be ensured in this liberal democracy. The second one, as you see, once you have devised the government and their institutions on the specificity of these particular political functions, we also have what is referred to as checks and balances system, wherein one arm of the government is not exceeding the constitutional framework or violating the constitutional framework, whereby the other arms of the government are ensuring that the constitutionality of the functioning of one particular arm of the government is ensured. It is this checks and balances system and the principle of separation of powers is what we see giving a particular form and the evolution of certain processes in the functionality of the government, and hence this is also true for parliament. Now, what has happened in the current session because of which there are concerns? The first one is there are criticisms over the procedural lapses. As we see, the procedure, whatever has been included in the functionality of the parliament, says that this checks and balances system must be ensured and the separation of powers principle must be ensured. In this aspect of checks and balances, Parliament must exercise her control over the executive, by which it means that this principle of parliamentary sovereignty in the conduct of her business, in making decisions in the form of legislations, must be ensured. Sovereignty, as you know, refers to the supreme authority that the parliament has to exercise. The supremacy here, as we also know, that is not absolute power or absoluteness that it enjoys, but it is about the qualified nature of such authority. And also we know that authority implies that there is acceptance of the people. So when we see that it is this particular fundamental idea of acceptance of the people, and this acceptance is also the limited acceptance pertaining to the exercise of legislative function alone, gives this principle of parliamentary sovereignty. Through this parliamentary sovereignty principle, Parliament has to exercise her control over the executive. What we saw is the procedural lapses as it has been criticized. The one such procedural lapse, as we have already seen, that there is suspension of many a number of MPs from the opposition, wherein both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha have passed these bills in the absence of these opposition members, by which it also means that there would not have been any meaningful debate and meaningful consideration of the dissent of these opposition benches. As this dissent has not been considered, there is no possibility of sending these bills to the next procedural requirement in case of dissent, that is sending this bill to either the select committee of the parliament or the joint parliamentary committee. This procedural lapse is what is being criticized. The second one is there is also the possibility of arbitrariness by the executive. If you take the example of the criminal justice reforms which have been passed, you know that there are three such bills which have been passed by both the houses of parliament, and both of these bills or three of these bills, whatever have been passed, seem to be catering to lot of arbitrariness and the possibility of vagueness by the executive power. When you see that this vagueness is there, it can also lead to the possibility of arbitrary use of power, or for that matter, the misuse of power. For example, when you see that these criminal justice bills have been passed, that is the Nyaya, Sakshya and Nagarik. If you see these three bills, one is representing the citizenship, the other one is representing justice, the third one is representing evidence. And we know that the criminal justice system, whatever we have, will have these criminal laws, and these laws must pertain to at least two kinds of systems. One is the crime against the body, the second one is the crime against the state. When you look at this crime against the body, for example, it says that any crime to be committed and the age limit for such consideration of what is referred to as crime has been set at this age of 7 years. Meaning, if you are above 7 years and if an action is purportedly being defined under crime as per these particular bills, then there will be the consequence of criminal procedure is being applied to a person who is above 7 years. This is in clear violation of many of the international conventions, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. When you see that this purported arbitrariness that is possible within these particular laws, that might lead to the arbitrary exercise of power by the executive. This is the major concern we have. The third one is there can be possible violation of even the fundamental rights. For example, you take the case of this Post Office Bill 2023. It is said that this Post Office Bill is giving lot of power for the government to even seizure the articles which are in transportation from one particular citizen to another particular citizen. On what grounds? The grounds have been, for example, mentioned in the name of security. For example, if one of the ground, that is the friendly relations with any other foreign state, if this ground is being violated as per the purported discretionary imagination of the state, then that article can be seized and there can be criminal liability that can be imposed upon the person who has passed this particular article to another particular citizen. This possibility of arbitrariness is what this particular law or the concern is mentioning. When we know that this is a concern, then the possible violation of the fundamental right is the right to privacy that has been guaranteed by the Supreme Court judgment, saying that this particular right is an inalienable aspect of Article 21, that is right to life and liberty, by the Supreme Court in the Puttaswamy judgment. When we know this Puttaswamy judgment is guaranteeing this right to privacy as a fundamental right, what is that guarantee that the Supreme Court judgment has also provided? The Supreme Court said that any particular provision that the government is bringing about must be part of a law, and having a law alone is not sufficient. This law must be clearly constitutional and valid. Once you have a valid law and a constitutional procedure incorporated into that particular law, then third, it must be clearly defined the grounds on which this particular law has been brought. The grounds on the basis of which this particular law has been brought. And the fourth one is, whatever the procedure that has been incorporated, it must lead to the procedural justice. It must lead to the procedural justice. And fifth, once you have this, whatever the law that has been brought must be considered by the legislature that this is the only possible way that we have and the best possible way that we have as part of many alternatives which are available in order to cater to a particular legislative need, a particular legislative purpose. This is referred to as the principle of proportionality, such that the violation of fundamental rights that is anyhow will be made because of such laws, particularly with respect to right to privacy, can be minimized. So this minimizing principle of proportionality is one another principle that the legislature must consider. So when we see that this post office bill has certain grounds on the basis of which there is possible exercise of arbitrariness by the government, this entire fundamental rights as a chapter, which in fact has been written against such possible arbitrariness by the executive, seem to be in danger or jeopardy. It is this concern which has been expressed. The fifth one is the purported statement that such amendments are in fact an attempt to decolonize laws is also being criticized. For example, Justice Verma Committee has stated that as part of criminal justice reforms, whenever they are brought in, he said that the crime against the body in the form of sexual offense or the rape must consider rape as a gender neutral crime rather than a specific gender called female. When the law is failing to make this as a gender neutral crime, it is failing to recognize the fact that gender neutrality must be as part of any crime or any criminal law that is going to be passed against the crime against the bodies. It is this particular fact which can be considered as still a continuation of the colonization of the law. So is this really a decolonization of law is what the criticism is. Now, when we see this, there is a particular precedent that we already have. For example, take the case of 100th Constitutional Amendment Act 2015. We know that this 100th Constitutional Act 2015 has given away, ceded Indian territory, a large chunk of Indian territory to Bangladesh, settling the long-standing boundary dispute that India and Bangladesh had. However, the speciality of this particular law is that this has been passed unanimously. Even when we were ceding the land, this was passed unanimously. And there was also acceptance of these particular provisions by all the states which were getting affected because of this particular law. What this suggested is that before making any particular legislation, it is the responsibility of the executive to see that there is an effective floor management. It is this aspect which is missing. The functionality of the democracy, the functionality of the parliament, in principle, is possible when there is effective management of the floor both on Lok Sabha and in Rajya Sabha by the incumbent government. In practice, when it is done, that is when the functionality of democracy on the floor of parliament will be meaningful. And we still remember how the pictures which have been photoshopped after the passage of this bill with lot of jubilation. This reflects the nature of this particular law as a precedent. Second one, we also have another precedent which probably tells us something that is negative. The 3 farm laws which have been passed in 2020, we know that they have actually been brought into enforcement in the form of ordinance under Article 123, and then these have been introduced into the Parliament for passage, and without any debate, in spite of opposition from the opposition benches, these have been passed. These have been passed, and we know that there was a widespread popular protest against these 3 bills to withdraw these 3 bills, in spite of the fact that these 3 bills have been touted as the new liberalization reforms which were pending in Indian economy. These two, one positive precedent and the other negative precedent, clearly tells us that not only procedurally but also substantively, the parliamentary procedures must be adhered to such that the parliament exercise of our control through the exercise of parliamentary sovereignty is possible, such that this checks and balances system can remain intact. What is the way forward that we have? Whenever executive performs her function, and we know that in our parliamentary democracy, most of the legislative business is at the behest of the executive. Executive must make sure that it is adhering to this principle of constitutionalism. The principle of constitutionalism states, as we know, that constitution acts as a limitation and the framework and principles act as a limitation over the possible arbitrariness by the possible exercise of overpower by the executive. It is this which has to be kept in mind. Second, there is also this principle of constitutional morality that Supreme Court has enunciated during the Sabarimala judgment, which has also been incorporated in its Aadhaar judgment. We know that this constitutional morality, as it is said, is going beyond the social morality. So the exercise of power is against the basic connotations and basic principles and framework of the Constitution, and hence the constitutional morality and adherence to such morality by the individual at the individual level will keep the legislative process and the execution of that particular law by the executive morally viable, even though it is legal to do whatever that has been incorporated in the law, either in the form of exercise of the executive power or in the form of, for example, exercise of anything related to arrest or the restrictions being imposed upon the freedoms of the individual. If that action were to be adhering to the constitutional morality, any possible arbitrariness in such actions can be minimized. Moving to the next article, we'll discuss this unequal space. This is important from GS2 gender equality point of view, where lack of inclusion had been the main concern which is being addressed in the policy circles. Look at this previous question, again from the perspective of gender equality and inclusion. Discuss the desirability of greater representation to women in the higher judiciary to ensure diversity, equity and inclusiveness. What is the context in which this particular issue is being debated? Recently, we know that in Rajya Sabha there was debate on paid menstrual leave, by which it means that menstrual cycle can be considered as a ground for giving leaves to some gender. Second, there were attempts made in recent years to bring this particular concern in the form of private member bill. Third, we know that no such proposal was made by the government or considered by the government to make provision for the paid menstrual leave, at least for the government employees or public sector employees. It is in this context we are looking into this particular debate. When you see what is referred to as menstrual leave, remember that it's a policy which is giving scope for women to take paid leave from work during the menstrual period. Remember that year on year, the periodic labor force survey which is being released is showing that there is a level of distressed employment amongst the women, and whenever there are normal conditions within the economy, the employment from the female as a gender is always on the decline. And this is a general trend that you see within Indian economy. Given this, from the development perspective and also from the inclusion perspective, in order to make them as part of labor force and as part of the employment, then the favorable conditions need to be created. In order to create such favorable conditions, one of such conditions is the need to consider this menstrual leave as a one parameter as part of the entire working conditions. So, this particular thing has to be considered also from the perspective of constitutionality. We know that Article 14 establishes what is referred to as general principle of equality, and we know that equality is totally against any kind of discrimination or any kind of hierarchy that's created in terms of both status and of opportunity. So because of this menstrual period, and this menstrual period as being seen as a stigma or considered as civilizationally, we know that there are prejudices, and alongside these prejudices, certain stigma are associated with the menstrual cycle. This stigma and prejudice, as we already know, will lead to exclusion. It also leads to discrimination. So it is in straight violation of the general principle of equality, even though this has not been considered in the legal front. Third, we have to keep in mind that this menstruation is being seen as a phenomena of pollution, polluting the environment of a particular family where it is dominated by the patriarchy, and two, this is being considered as against the purity that we observe. It is this which is leading to such prejudice and stigma. Third, we also know that there is an impact of such stigma and discrimination over the social status of women, and hence this restriction and discrimination is extended to even the work environment, particularly the religious spaces. It is this which we want to address. Hence, having menstrual leave as one of the aspects of working conditions would be a favorable one for the inclusion of women in the workforce. Moreover, keep in mind that in spite of this particular measure as seen as an inclusive measure, few arguments which are posed against such menstrual leave. First, as the government itself has pointed out, if such inclusive measuring is being taken, then inherently, in some way, we are considering this as a handicap for women. No, it is not according to the government. We know that it's a natural cycle. Second, it would also lead to discrimination against women because it is now evident that she has taken the leave on grounds of menstruation. Because of the stigma and the kind of prejudice that is associated with this particular phenomena, this might again lead to discrimination rather than addressing the discrimination. And third, this may also lead to violation of privacy because, as we have already seen, stigma and discrimination and the kind of prejudice which is associated with this particular menstruating cycle, keep in mind it may also violate our privacy when the stigma is continuing because of this. However, we must remember that in spite of such possibility, the menstrual leave ultimately, as sociologists point out, would lead to favorable situation for the women, and more importantly, inclusion of women in the society, particularly in workplace. There are certain examples internationally, and you see in Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, in these countries, they have one or the other form of menstrual leave. Second, one must remember that government also has recognized the legitimacy of maternity leave or the child care leaves. On similar lines, even menstruating leave can also be considered. Third, remember that for few women, it is also impacting the work performance. Given this, the adverse work performance is going to be detrimental for the organization, and hence having the menstrual leave might be beneficial for the organization also, apart from the female. Fourth, extending menstrual leave in fact might help in reducing the stigma rather than increasing the stigma. Fifth, menstrual leaves could increase the productivity of women. Remember that just by showing the fact that there are very small percentage of women who are facing such menstruation related issues, it is not logical, scientific and rational to say that for such small population, one need not have such a provision. We have to keep in mind that it is a measure which is for this larger objective of inclusion. Getting this menstrual leave as a policy hence will strengthen the general principle of equality, and will also strengthen the provisions that there can be special provision for women and children in favor of their life and livelihoods. We'll move to the next article. We shall look into this coming soon, a cafeteria for oil spill hit birds at creek in Tamil Nadu. This is being discussed under GS paper 3, environmental pollution and degradation point of view. What is the previous year question that we have seen from this particular syllabus perspective? As you see here, the question has been asked in 2018 with regard to wetland. What is a wetland? Explain the Ramsar concept of wise use in the context of wetland conservation. Cite two examples of Ramsar sites from India. What is the context in which we are discussing this issue? Recently, we came to know that there is oil spill from this CPCL or Chennai Petroleum Corporation Limited refinery, and this oil spill that we have witnessed is because of impact of cyclone Michang, and this oil spill has spread into the Indore Creek, then Buckingham Canal because of Kosas Taliyar River, and we also know that the relics of this oil spill was also seen in the Pulicat Lake. We have to keep in mind that this is the winter season, and there will be arrival of guests in the form of the migratory species or the birds which would come to these lakes in order to seek their winter stay. Given this ecological disruption, there is a large furor and huge furor over this particular issue. When we see this issue of oil spill and beyond, particularly because of disaster, the concern has been expressed towards these right from the Fukushima nuclear plant disaster in Japan, when it got impacted because of the tsunami. This oil spill is not the first instance in India, because in 2017, two cargo ships have collided in this region, and it has caused the much higher level of ecological disruption in this part of region. Second, in this region of Mandali, on the vicinity of Chennai, we know that there are highly polluting industries there, and most of these are the petrochemical industries. Apart from this, the release of fly ash from many of the leaky pipelines that the thermal power plants are located in this region are also causing ecological disruption in this particular region. There are guidelines and directions from National Green Tribunal with regard to this, as this polluting environment is causing disruption to the functionality of the ecosystem itself. One such direction was given to remove fly ash in 2017 to this power generation and distribution company located in who has the thermal power plant in this part of the region. In spite of such directions, till now, as the reports are lying, there was no substantial improvement in the condition. Second, apart from this, there were many encroachments within this wetland. Hence, there are widespread violations against the Ramsar Wetland Convention. Also, Tamil Nadu Wetland Mission was given directions with regard to such violations that you are seeing in this indoor part of the region, yet there were no much improvements. Third, when you see the fragility of this region, as you know, NGT has directed the government there to study the wetlands here as per the 1996 Coastal Zone Management Plan. After that, many coastal zone regulatory norms were issued, and recently, as you also know, that these have been amended, yet a plan to restore this region as per this particular management plan has not been done yet. It is all these ecological concerns that we have because of this issue of creating a cafeteria for birds in this part of the region is being discussed. Apart from this, there are few regulatory concerns which we have to keep in mind. First such regulatory concern is, as critics mention, that there is no political will to look into this particular matter. For example, in Ennore Manali region, as we have already seen that there are so many polluting industries, but there was no substantial action with regard to relocating these industries or trying to adhere to the regulatory norms that we have already discussed, either from the coastal regulatory zone or from the wetland convention point of view. Second, even during this particular oil spill, the government has established or set up this crisis management committee only after 8 days, which also reveals the fact that the political will is somewhat arbitrary and very, very weak. Second, whenever there is such political will, remember that this political will had been very much ad hoc. As you see in this setting up of crisis management committee alone, it was so ad hoc. Second, there is no standard operating procedure with regard to how to address such issues. And third, we also see that there is industrial pollution, as we have already seen, and oil spill. When they see these particular issues, they see these two as two separate problems with regard to the same region, and addressing or looking for solutions for these two as separate solutions rather than looking at it as an ecosystem and finding a solution which is very much ecological in nature. Moreover, you also have this issue of weakening environmental regulatory norms. For example, as per CRZ regulations, the construction of illegal development projects is not allowed in this part of the region. However, government has altered the CRZ regulatory norms by including this expression strategic. Hence, if the government on case-by-case basis considers that a particular project is a strategic project, then in spite of violation of the coastal regulatory zone, for the development purposes or economic growth purposes, they will allow the development of such projects in this part of the region. This is one such dilution you see. Second one is that decentralization of wetland management and narrowing of the definition of the wetland. Both of these have been advocated by the Wetland Conservation and Management Rules 2017. This narrowing of the definition of wetland, wherein they have removed creek, they have removed lagoon, for example, from the definition of being a wetland, has allowed the government to set up these particular industries. Moreover, decentralization has actually brought down the level of seriousness that one must have towards the adherence to such regulatory norms. Also, there is institutional reluctance, wherein the institutions such as the Pollution Control Board, all these matters have now brought some of the NGOs, some of the civil society organizations to consider at least creating a particular sanctuarium for the migratory birds, particularly to take their stay in this part of the region as part of this continuous ecological journey that they would have. Moving to the next article, we will discuss this IMF's message. As we see that a flexible exchange rate and fiscal consolidation has been mentioned as critical for macroeconomic stability by IMF. We'll look into the details. Look at this previous year question. Craze for gold in Indians has led to surge in import of gold in recent years and put pressure on balance of payments and external value of rupee. In view of this, examine the merits of gold monetization scheme. He is trying to look at the performance of Indian economy from the perspective of her relationship or dependence over the external economy. It is in this sense he is referring to this balance of payments and how gold imports have actually impacted the balance of payments performance by the Indian government or Indian economy. It is in this sense how the introduction of this gold monetization scheme has been beneficial for Indian economy. This is what he is trying to ask and examine. What is the context in which this article is being talked about? Whenever there is a member nation of IMF, they'll sign what is referred to as articles of agreement, in which they say that whatever the terms and conditions which have been proposed by the International Monetary Fund are acceptable to us. So when an economy or the government is signing these articles of agreement, then it is becoming a member of this International Monetary Fund. As part of these articles of agreement, you have Article 4. Under such Article 4, IMF holds bilateral discussions with her members, and these discussions will usually be every year, except when there are certain disruptions. You see that these discussions would be occurring on yearly basis. IMF, as part of this Article 4 discussions, bilateral discussions, has concluded that the Indian economy is performing with macroeconomic stability. We shall look into the details of this. As we have already seen that IMF in fact looks into the macroeconomic stability of any particular economy from fundamentally two particular things. One, what is their financial condition, and two, how far this financial condition is related to their relationship with or that economy's relationship with external economy. It is in these two aspects IMF has certain regulatory frameworks. Look at this expression, balance of payments. When an economy is a closed economy, it means that the economy's dependence for its requirements is solely on their own domestic resources. It is not exporting or importing, or it might be exporting or importing with respect to whatever the government decision has been made. If government says that we can import only 100 kgs of rice, it is only to this extent we will be import. If they say that we can export 200 kgs of rice and it is only to this extent we will be exporting. What balance of payments is? This import-export economy that you create because of your dependence over the other external economy rather than your own domestic economy. This relationship can be measured. So it is the measurement of our relationship with external economy. We refer to it as balance of payments. Now, balance of payments is nothing but a balance sheet of our performance with regard to such external economies. We are importing, exporting from China, we are importing, exporting from Russia, we are importing, exporting from USA. Putting together all these, what is our performance? How much has come into and how much has left Indian economy? So this balance sheet called balance of payments has been divided into two fundamental accounts, current account and capital account. Within this current account, you see that imports and exports are placed. You see that whatever the incomes that are coming towards India, whether it is the real income or the transfer income or the incomes which are going out of Indian economy, they are also included. And the third one is whenever either the government or any corporate entity are borrowing, it is also part of the the current account, and whatever has been lent from Indian economy towards the external economy, that is also part of the current account. These three components of current account, and you have what is referred to as capital account, which constitute POP. The capital account has two fundamental elements. One is investment and the other one is reserves. Generally, we find that the current account and the capital account will be in balance, such that, as we already know fundamentally in any accounting norm, that the balance sheet would ultimately show a figure of 0, wherein the capital account and the current account would be balancing each other, either in terms of income or in terms of expenditure. When we know that the balance of payments has to be 0, in practice, you find that there will be certain discrepancy between both of these accounts, because whatever the money that is incoming towards an economy may not be same as whatever the money that is going out of the economy. As we know that all these are measured and expressed in terms of money. Given this discrepancy, what you see is whenever this discrepancy is wide, it leads to what is referred to as BOP crisis. And whenever this BOP crisis is there, the economies might collapse. We have seen this occurring in 1997 in East Asian economies. We have seen this occurring in Indian economy in 1991. It is this BOP crisis is what we have to avoid when you are an open economy. This is what is being referred to as macroeconomic trilemma. In order to avoid any such BOP crisis, what we have to have is three things. One, there has to be price stability. There has to be price stability, as you see here. And this price stability, whenever you have, as we know that the money supply, whatever that is ensured by the monetary authority within economy, is regulated by the interest rate that it decides in the form of repo rate. So when we know that the price stability is there, there will also be interest rate stability, by which we are saying that there is macro financial stability, because at whatever the interest rates earlier the financial institutions were lending, that interest rate regime is continuing, by which it means that there is no fluctuation with regard to the financial market or conditions. Long-term perspective, there is a stability. Once this stability is there, then it can ensure what is referred to as exchange rate stability. For example, when a particular good is being priced at 100 rupees and it is being exported to USA, assuming that $1 is equal to 50 rupees, then we will be spending $2 in order to send these particular goods, or rather the American citizens will be using $2 in order to buy this particular product. When we know that this is the condition wherein our currency is distinct from the currencies of the external economy, then the exchange is what has to happen. This will happen at a particular rate, which is referred to as exchange rate. Whenever prices are volatile, wherein this 100 rupees might have become 150 rupees in terms of their price level, then rather than $2, they will be spending $3, by which it means that your goods have got appreciated. Their price has increased. It is this increased price condition would fluctuate exchange rate, because there will be more demand for dollars, because rather than $2 you are spending $3. As there is more demand for dollar, there will be more money that you have to spend in order to buy that particular dollar. So this exchange rate fluctuation can be stabilized when you have price stability and interest rate stability. It is what referred to as macroeconomic trilemma. For any open economy, the central bank, for example, in India, it is the Reserve Bank of India, which tries to manage this particular trilemma. Having understood this, what is the findings of the IMF report? By and large, it says that we are able to maintain the macroeconomic stability on two fronts. One, from the front of our relationship with external economy, it says that the exchange rate regime is stable because of price stability over a long term, and because of interest rate stability for last few monetary reviews that the RBI has done. Second, it also says that there is a stability also from the perspective of domestic economy, which it says that our fiscal situation is also stable, by which it means that the government is on the path of meeting her fiscal deficit targets that it has set within the budget. In order to conclude this, IMF report has pointed out that there is decline in the inflation, even though volatility exists because of the volatility in food prices and fuel prices. Second, because of this decline in inflation, and by and large, as RBI is able to maintain this inflation within the zone of the inflation targeting framework, which has to lie between 2% to 6%, it says that the financial condition of the economy is also resilient, because by and large, whatever the price stability that we have is also leading to stable financial condition. The finance is accruing at the stable interest rate. This is what it means. Then, in order to curtail this situation of possible impact of price instability over the exchange rate regime, government has acted from the perspective of fiscal policy alone, whereby it started focusing upon more services exports by making those services exports very resilient. And at the same time, the oil import bill is also getting reduced within the current account, whereby it has brought down the current account deficit, which was hovering nearly at 2% to 1.8%. It is this stability that IMF report is mentioning. And because of this stability and because of these measures, we see that there is exchange rate stability also. So this exchange rate stability, interest rate stability and price stability are proving that they are catering to the macroeconomic stability. In spite of any global headwind or global shock towards Indian economy, even that can be addressed when you have higher foreign exchange reserves. In spite of some volatility in this, by and large, India is able to maintain foreign exchange reserves that can meet our requirements from the external economy at the current price level for at least more than 4 months. This is being referred to as macroeconomic stability by IMF. We'll move to the next article. This article from Hindu: WHO pre-qualifies a malaria vaccine by Serum Institute. WHO has added this vaccine of R21, which is to build immunity against the malaria, has been added to its list of pre-qualified vaccines. This pre-qualified vaccines is what we have to focus upon. Second, this is the second such vaccine to get such recognition after this RTSS malaria vaccine that has already got this recognition. And third, we have to keep in mind that this vaccine has been developed by Oxford University and the Serum Institute of India. It is in this context we are discussing this issue. Second, we have to also keep in mind the significance of this development. The significance of this development can be ascertained from these two particular facts. The first one is there is high malarial burden globally, particularly in African continent. According to WHO, almost 1 person every minute is losing his life because of malaria. This is the huge public health burden that the humanity has. Second, even if you look at it from the Indian point of view, according to World Malaria Report 2021, released by WHO, 83% of the estimated cases and 82% of all malaria deaths, that is the major chunk of such disease burden and deaths because of this disease, is in India when you look at the Southeast Asian region. Given this vaccine development is significant for us. Third, malaria, as you know, is caused by Plasmodium, and the Plasmodium has a huge life cycle. So when it bites a human being, then it begins her life cycle, and in this life cycle, the first stage is the sporocyte. So when malaria infected female Anopheles mosquito bites a human being, this mosquito transmits a motile of sporozoid, there are few technical terms here. You need to remember this, but keep in mind that this is something which is the beginning of the life cycle of the plasmodium within human body. The vaccine which has been developed is in fact releases a component of protein that actually gets secreted by sporozoid. So you are taking the vaccine, and this vaccine releases whatever the protein that sporozoid actually releases into your body when you are bitten by the Anopheles mosquito, which is infected by malaria. This vaccine hence gives the immunity strength for you by enabling the white blood cells to record and memorize this information related to this protein, and hence over a time your body will be immune to any infection from malaria. Second, this particular vaccine has been developed based on the rDNA technology, where this vaccine is combined with a segment of hepatitis B virus, wherein this hepatitis B, when it is introduced into this plasmodium, which is at this life stage of sporozoid, this gives it a robust immune response. So this vaccine based on this will be giving you the necessary immunity strength, and it is called as protein subunit vaccine. As you see here, there are various types of vaccines. One is referred to as whole vaccine, under which you have this inactivated and live attenuated vaccines, and then you have what is referred to as component vaccines. Within these component vaccines, we are referring to R21 from this component of protein subunit vaccine. So the protein that gets released by the pathogen is what you are introducing into the human body in order to give the necessary immunity response. What is the benefit of getting this pre-qualified status? Getting WHO's pre-qualification status makes sure of two fundamental things. Globally, there is effort to address this public health disease burden through global immunization programs. For this purpose of global immunization program, the requirement is of safe and effective immunization vaccines. And these safe and effective vaccines will be available to the world when it gets this pre-qualification status. Second, the pre-qualification status also makes sure that this vaccine procurement by UNICEF is possible, and then you have some alliance referred to as Gavi, which is the vaccine alliance, and once this is achieved, then the Serum Institute of India, in this case, who is the manufacturer of this vaccine, will be able to get the funding support from the Gavi, that is the vaccine alliance. Now, what is this Gavi for vaccines and immunization as an alliance? Remember that during the 1980s and 1990s, before the emergence of this globalization, privatization, liberalization phase, world was reeling under continuous market failures because of certain dynamic changes which were occurring. During these market failures, the disease burden, particularly because of communicable diseases, was also rising abnormally. And it is at this stage we know that the Gavi as an alliance was formed at the initiation of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And this Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, along with certain other partners, have established what is referred to as Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, which is shortly referred to as Gavi. And this Gavi has the mission of establishing global health partnership such that there is equal access to new and underused vaccines, particularly for children in the world's poorest countries. It is this particular requirement which will be fulfilled, whereby the vaccine manufacturer and the poor countries can get necessary funding in order to address this disease burden. In conclusion, we can say that as we are aspiring for a malaria-free status by 2027 and its complete elimination by 2030, this vaccine development is in the right direction from the perspective of addressing or getting the status and also getting the necessary funding from the global institutions such as Gavi. Second, Along with this, in India, the vaccine research and manufacture has got further boost under the Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India program. From the perspective of these two, this vaccine development is in the very much right direction. Having done with the discussion over the articles, now we'll move to few practice questions. Take this question. Consider the following statements. IMF holds a review of macroeconomic condition of member states on a yearly basis under the bilateral articles of agreement with the member country. This is the right statement as we know. Then you have the second statement where it states that Indian economy was placed as a resilient one by IMF given the exchange rate's ability to absorb the external shocks. This is also a correct statement and hence answer has to be C. Moving to the next question. Consider the following statements about the Center for Wetland Conservation and Management. The first one is Center for Wetland Conservation and Management functions under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, which is right. It was established in 2010 on wetland lay, which is a false statement because it was established in 2021. And 3, its primary objective is to promote sustainable coastal urbanization in India, which is wrong. And hence the answer has to be 1 only. Moving to the third question. Consider the following statements. Malaria is a vector-borne disease caused by a protozoan. We know that it is Plasmodium, hence it is right answer. The R21 or Matrix M is the second malarial vaccine to get pre-qualified status in the World Health Organization's list of vaccines. This is also a correct statement as we know. The vaccine targets the sporozoid stage of the Plasmodium entering the human blood. This is also a correct statement and hence answer has to be all the 3. Moving to the fourth question. Which of the following statements are correct regarding the Wetland Conservation and Management Rules 2017 in India? The rules decentralize the management of wetlands and delegates more power to the state governments. This is also correct statement. The second one is they include backwaters and lagoons in the definition of wetlands. No, this is the incorrect statement. The Central Wetland Regulatory Authority established under the 2010 rules was replaced with state wetland authorities in the 2017 rules. This is the correct statement. And the fourth one, they mandate the creation of a national inventory of wetlands within a stipulated time frame. This is also a false statement and hence answer has to be A, 1 and 3 only. Going to the fifth question. Consider the following statements regarding the Maternity Benefit Amendment Act 2017. The first statement says that government has increased paid maternity leave from 12 weeks to 26 weeks, of which not more than 8 weeks shall precede the date of expected delivery, which is a false statement we know. Depending upon the nature of work assigned to a woman, the act provides for work from home. This is also a false statement which is not right and hence answer has to be none of the above. Moving to the mains question. In light of recent developments, discuss the importance of principles governing the effective legislative functioning of Parliament and executive control by the Parliament. When you write answer for this question, as you see clearly that we have discussed this and we know that there are 2 fundamental principles which are governing this framework of principles which are governing the functioning of Parliament and also the effective legislative control. And then write within the body the recent developments in the parliamentary functioning and need of these principles in legislative processes and also in the exercise of control over the executive, which we have discussed in the debate. And conclusively, you can write that by affirming the importance of constitutionalism and constitutional morality for the integrity and effectiveness of the Indian Parliament, we will be able to effectively end the answer for this particular question. Thanks and all for watching the video. Please like, share and subscribe to our channel, Narayana IAS. Thank you.